honorable ministers, traditional and religious leaders, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to deliver this joint keynote statement at the SDGs Investment Fair organized by the government of Ghana. This is the third year the fair is taking place, and it continues to offer an opportunity for mutually beneficial partnerships for the SDGs. It is an attestation to the broader role of unique and strong partnerships in accelerating global development efforts. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in September 2015 was a landmark achievement for the world, especially for addressing persistent issues of poverty, inequality, and exclusion globally. The adopted goals and targets are not just promises or wish lists, but rather a set of actionable demands from citizens to their leaders to bequeath to them and their future generations a safe, secured, and prosperous planet. The year 2020 indicates that we have 10 more years to make our commitment towards the SDGs. The global community, as part of efforts to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs, therefore launched the Decade of Action last year, that is 2019, to draw attention to the 10 years remaining in achieving our set targets. Unfortunately, a few months following this renewed call, the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic unleashed a situation that has exacerbated human suffering with far-reaching implications on our collective efforts to improve lives and achieve the SDGs. This undoubtedly stalled our progress towards the SDGs. It introduced us to a new world where the status quo no longer exists. Phrases such as "we are not in normal times" found their way into our local parlance. A little over 9 months ago, this will have caused a stir and made people wonder what was amiss. But today, it is normal to hear people make such remarks. Even though the full impact of the crisis is still unfolding, there is an enormous loss of lives and enormous loss of livelihoods, deepening poverty and hunger, and bringing about their social, economic, and health impacts, which have exposed infrastructure gaps and socioeconomic vulnerabilities in our countries. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, global GDP is expected to contract sharply in 2020, with estimates ranging from 3.2% to 5.2%, potentially the largest contraction in economic activity since the Great Depression, and indeed worse than was experienced during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. In 2020 alone, an estimated 35 to 60 million people could be pushed into extreme poverty, reversing the declining global trend of the last 20 plus years. Some 1.6 billion people working in the informal sector are estimated to be at risk of losing their livelihoods, and many lack access to any form of social protection. These challenges and their resultant effects continue to forge an emerging recognition and appetite for enhanced collaboration and partnerships. A new drive towards partnerships is also taking place within an ongoing reconstruction of the post-COVID development landscape and the emergence of new and powerful private sector players. While this reconstruction is ongoing, there is an equal increase in the level of vulnerability, in the level of marginalization, and indeed in the level of extreme poverty. This paradox of the emergence of extreme haves and emergence of extreme have-nots is serving to motivate more individuals and corporations to seek partnerships through formalized structures of support. These renewed partnerships have been particularly heightened during the critical stages of the pandemic. For example, the government, with support from the private sector, set up the Ghana COVID-19 Fund to mobilize private sector funding to support the fight against the pandemic. The response from the private sector was overwhelming. There have also been interest and support from philanthropists, individuals, trade associations, and civil servants to this cause. I take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone who contributed, complementing the government's efforts to ensure that we leave no one behind in this crisis. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we must seize the opportunities that the pandemic presents and leverage on this moment, taking bold steps to turn the tide in the wake of the crisis and persist towards achieving the SDGs. We have always said that the SDGs are ambitious, so we must not let our enthusiasm die. This is the time for change, for a profound systemic shift to a more sustainable and a more resilient economy that works for both the people and the planet. Our renewed policy responses must be coherent and centered on the well-being of the people, empowering them and advancing equality. The need for a revolution in policy, mindset, and practice must seek to engender inclusive and accountable governance systems, adaptive institutions which are resilient to future shocks, universal social protection, health insurance, and stronger digital infrastructure as part of the transformations that are needed. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is for this reason that the dialogues at this year's fair are aimed at discussions that will facilitate sustainable financing. We hope your deliberations will include discussions on policy options that will promote resilience to future shocks. We are asking you to be candid as you deliberate on critical issues such as financing, trade, social protection, and infrastructure. We also look forward to the discourse around innovation and pushing the boundaries with respect to ICT in education, in telemedicine, and in telehealth. After all, we have come to accept that fact that we are not in normal times, so we should not do business as normal, especially with regards to the SDGs. This means that financing for the SDGs must be innovative and sustainable to enable us regain the momentum in accelerating the implementation of the SDGs. Beyond alignment with the national budget, the financing gap requires improving domestic resource mobilization and leveraging available resources from the private sector for accelerated implementation of priority interventions. Your suggestions are thus welcome, and we look forward to engaging further. And once again, welcome to the third SDG Investment Fair, and thank you for your attention.